From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday, March 31st, 2022, the last day of the month. It's also a very special day in the Azar household. Mrs. Azar, it's her birthday today. We're celebrating. We're going to have a party, a big good time. So happy birthday to really the better half of everything I do. Wishing her lots of health and happiness and success. And with the little one in her arms this year, it's an even more special birthday than ever before. So happy birthday. With that being said, folks, the world of cyber, it's a lot of stuff going on, right? So let's get into today's show. But before we do that, big shout out to KnowBe4 for their support of our program. You can see more about them in the show notes. Again, all the stories, everything we're referencing in the articles, all the stuff you're seeing is in the show notes. You can find it on our YouTube channel, on our website at cyberhubpodcast.com. You can find it in the notes on your favorite podcast listening platform, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or any one of the other many awesome platforms that exist out there in the world of podcasting. So we'll get to all of that and more. Whatever you're drinking this morning, I found myself really starting to enjoy Celsius, right? Like, I know I'm giving him an ad now, but that's kind of been my drink while I travel. If I can't get an espresso, I get a Celsius. Kind of makes up for it. Not really, a little bit. So let's crack this bad boy open. Coffee cup cheers, folks. And we'll get into today's show with a lot going on. So let's go into Spring4Shell. So it's spring. That's why I got the name. It's a new kind of Log4Shell type threat. Has to do with Java. Has everyone up in arms. Because there's a little bit of a panic. And I'll explain why. So there's been a disclosure of several vulnerabilities that affect the Spring Java framework. So it's a lot of confusion and concerns because it's similar to Log4Shell. Now, VMware owns Spring and has been described as the world's most popular Java framework. Spring's designed to increase speed and productivity by making Java programming much easier. On Wednesday, a Chinese researcher went into GitHub and uploaded a live proof of concept exploit for remote code execution vulnerability that affects the Spring Framework core module. The POC has since been removed, which was the first red flag. So did the Chinese researcher post it to be a good part of the security community and then take it down because the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, said, we have a law of how you disclose this stuff. You violated the law. Take it down, and you're going to go spend time, in one of our re-education camps in China, right? Essentially, servitude, slavery, modern day in China happens all the time, So a CVSS score of 10 has been assigned a bug, but there's no CVE identifier as of yet. Around the world, learning about the existence of Spring4Shell, many warned that the vulnerability could turn out to be much worse than Log4j, which could be exploited simply because of the wide-scale use of Spring4Shell. The confusion around it made it worse by two other Spring security holes that were disclosed and patched just this week. Tracked to CV 2022-229-63, it's been described as a medium severity issue in the Spring Cloud function that can be exploited to access local resources. The second Spring vulnerability disclosed this week is CV 2022-229-50 and is a medium severity denial of service flaw affecting the Spring framework. Both flaws could be exploited using specially crafted Spring expression language expressions. So that's the spell is what it really stands for. There are other unconfirmed reports of Spring4Shell being actively exploited in attacks. Given the confusion surrounding the vulnerabilities, these claims should be taken with a grain of salt, but then also looked at. So here's what we should be doing as practitioners this morning. Do we use Spring? Wonderful. Can we track Spring? Great. Let's track Spring and see what it's all about. And then let's monitor compensating controls, look at anything that's going within it, and look at the Log4j TTPs and IOCs, because it's probably going to be very similar and see if you can find those identifiers within Spring. That would be the smart thing to do this morning. Let's talk a little bit about the Okta breach here in our next story. So Sitel is blaming Okta. Sitel blames the Okta breach on legacy network from acquisition. There's a bunch of stuff going around this on Twitter. I don't go to Twitter. I've read about it. I've seen some of it because people have been referencing it back and forth and sending it over. But the company at the center of a wide-ranging data breach that impacted Okta is saying that a legacy network from a recent acquisition is the cause of their security incident. Here's the deal, though. That's not an excuse, right? So Sitel said they traced the breach back to a legacy network of Sykes Enterprises, a company they acquired in August of 2021. They're releasing a statement because they're being portrayed inaccurately in recent media coverage. Late on January 20th, Sitel Group was made aware of a security incident affecting a portion of the legacy Sykes network only. Following the security incident, Sitel Group took swift action to contain the attack, notify and protect any potentially impacted clients who were serviced by this legacy organization. They've issued on the following day, they issued client-facing communications to notify customers. But how many customers were impacted? The company says about, on its website, the company says it works in at least 40 countries, has over 700 deals with customer brands, but they didn't really say how many outside of Okta were impacted by this on their end. There's been a Excel that's been put out there that shows that they had their passwords on an Excel sheet. So just saying something to keep in mind here. There's a lot of data going back and forth, whether it be bad cyber hygiene or whether it be something else. Something to really keep in mind here is your supply chain is critical, and you've got to keep good track of what's going on there. We'll move to China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia, all using the Ukraine invasion in phishing attacks. Google reported yesterday that it's seeing evidence of indicating a range of state-backed threat actors using the recent Ukraine invasion to steal credentials through malicious emails and links, essentially targeting military personnel. They're targeting NATO. They're targeting different government organizations across the world. Cold Driver, which is a Russian-based threat actor, was accused of targeting several U.S.-based NGOs, think tanks, the military of a Balkan country, and the Ukrainian defense contractor with credential phishing attacks. They've also targeted the NATO Center for Excellence as well with these types of campaigns. China's doing the same. North Korea is doing the same. And Iran's doing the same. Who would have thought that this axis would be not taking advantage of what's going on? If you're in the government sector, if you're supporting the government sector or critical infrastructure, mind you, these in the Ukraine news, the war in the Ukraine really does impact your business. You're going to be targeted. Keep your eyes out for this kind of data. Look at MITRE, look at any of one of your EDR companies and Microsoft and see what domains they're seeing this stuff come from. Start blocking them, IPs, etc. Make it a little bit harder. President Biden yesterday extended the national emergency due to elevated malicious cyber activity. This goes on to say that the extension of a state of national emergency that was declared with prevalent and severe malicious cyber threats due to United States national security, foreign policy, and economy. The Executive Order 13694, which really the first national emergency around cyber, was declared on April 1st, 2015 by then President Barack Obama, who also sanctioned a bunch. This was their name and shame policy. For those who don't remember, that really worked out very, very well. On December 28th, 2016, Obama issued another Executive Order 13757 to amend 13694 because such malicious attacks were being used to undermine the democratic process and institutions. Remember the whole thing about Russia interfering with the 2016 election that now we know really was just made up because yesterday the DNC and the Clinton campaign had to pay a fine for the Steele dossier that was behind this whole thing. So very interesting that we're extending this up. I don't know what the purpose behind it is. CISO is already issuing notifications. FBI is, so is NSA. So, unless this is a resource move, it makes really awkward that this national emergency was extended. Beyond just extending this national emergency, it does give the federal government a lot of technology power and removes a lot of oversight and restrictions that the government has from a cybersecurity perspective, especially domestically, but also in a foreign perspective. And so Interesting. I've never seen a national emergency really go for this long. This has been now going on for 8 years, folks. So just keep that in mind. While we need attention for cyber, we definitely don't want that to be one. And our final story for today is we talked about multi-factor authentication yesterday on the show. ARS Technica and Wired did a wonderful write-up around a sinister way to beat multi-factor authentication and how that's actually on the rise. And they reference lapses and the groups behind SolarWinds and many others of how they're starting to defeat weaker MFA protections, and especially seeing it become a more relevant style of attack over the last several months. So the strongest of the MFA, FIDO2, obviously we're not going to go into that, but what they're seeing is there's significant attacks like what Lapsus did with Microsoft, Okta, and NVIDIA, where they just made a bunch of calls and tried to get them into an MFA portal, try to get to take over MFA in order to gain access. And this is where the proper deployment of MFA with VPN, with all these things, is really critical. And I think that's even more important. So we have to look at this from several pieces and perspectives of how we're going to do this and how we deploy MFA within our organizations. And the way we do that is a few folds. One, use an app. Number two, set a time if you're going to reset it or re-enroll someone in MFA. Make sure they're doing it with the guise of understanding that you're never really going to text them or take advantage of it or do it in any other way, right? Number three, education awareness around MFA and proper deployment. SMS does not really work, right? SMS is the easiest form to take advantage of. Now they're starting to find other ways, including the MFA prompt bombing technique, which was effective against Microsoft itself, where they start to just send you a bunch of emails, a bunch of text messages on MFA and prompts in order for you to actually fall for it. And you want to just take care of it in order to move on or go about your day, because it really does bug you. So, folks, that's it for our show today. We'll be back on Monday with a whole lot more of what's going on in the world of security. Until then, have a great rest of your day. Enjoy this awesome Thursday and enjoy your weekend. And we'll see you all on Monday. Until then, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening